My teaching philosophy is composed of a few key components based on personal experience of how I've received education throughout my life. To start with, disability in education. Having a learning disability, or in fact any disability, while trying to get an education can present some difficulties for both teacher and student. Thomas and May states that they want to strive towards proactively making higher education accessible, relevant and engaging, which can be translated in FE. It is brilliant in theory, but in practice is still something many teachers are trying to achieve. Addressing the needs of disabled students, I've noticed throughout my experiences, seems to be easy for an educator if the disability is physical. We all know we need to provide a ramp for a student in a wheelchair, but how do we provide that ramp for someone with depression? I am eager to promote social and cultural diversity, equality of opportunity and inclusion. Our professional standards are the backbones of our roles and responsibilities as teachers. One benefit of studying to be a teacher in 2017-2018 is the importance and knowledge we put on an inclusive environment for all, and remember to stretch and challenge, to pull down barriers for all learners, to get the best results out of students as they can possibly achieve. When reading Mike Gerson's Blue Taxonomy, he discusses how stretching and challenging students should be fun and engaging. There's that word again, engaging. This is how I want to conduct my lessons wherever possible. Harriet Harper, in Outstanding Teaching and Lifelong Learning, suggests ways in which inclusive environments are successful, for example, paired work. However, I find myself believing that inclusivity and disability should be addressed as one, because being inclusive would mean being inclusive to cultural background, physical disability, age, gender, mental health, race, religion, and the list goes on. But how as teachers are we to make sure our classrooms meet the needs for every student? It is my role and responsibility to be as educated as I can on all the learners' needs, creating an environment where they all feel equal, but as Hopkins said, still being recognised as individuals. I find myself drawn to offender learning. I believe it is my role, my responsibility, part of my philosophy to give learners that second, third, 10th chance in education, that final motivational push, to give them respect and the chance to learn in their own way, to get the best out of the students. With shockingly increasing levels of permanent exclusion, and how many of those students have SEN needs is appalling. We as teachers are not doing everything we can to support the needs of every student. We then turn and look how a student is 5 times more likely to go to prison after facing permanent exclusion. I have found there is a massive percentage of uneducated students in my class in prison with SEN needs. There is a pattern, and the strongest part of my teaching philosophy is to help those who need it and to never turn away from anyone's right to an education. With studies showing that educated prisoners are less likely to return to prison, I find my true calling in this sector. I believe in utilising education and training, almost disguising formal education. As Chickering and Gampson put it, students do not learn by just sitting in classes listening to teachers, memorising pre-packed assignments and spitting out answers. The best way I believe my students can learn is to fill classes with student-centred learning and to develop social responses and human interactions within a tough environment. I have read that teaching some people refer to as being an entertainer. As someone that specialises in performing arts, I find the term demeaning to performers, but also does not give teachers the credit where it's due. I like to think of teaching as a truth. I understand that people call it performance, but for me, it's the only time I could perform as myself. I would consider myself a facilitator, promoting self-learning and self-actualisation, as Maslow discusses through his hierarchy of needs theory. I have always believed in talking to my students with respect, no matter the age, but particularly in FE. It is an important part of my teaching philosophy, as it helps a student to have dialogue needed for the world outside the classroom, to become a fully functioning member of society. Bringing this idea of being a facilitator permits me to approach my role in a way that will allow my students to become their best selves, or as Cole Rogers said, real or ideal selves, which ultimately promotes positive learning behaviour. Students have every answer in the world sat in their pockets, using technology to their advantage. But with the pressures of cultural and social changes in society, I think it's important for me as a media performance specialist to constantly be changing and adapting my pedagogical approach to create environments where students can explore current affairs, to adapt the way I teach according to sensitive issues that may be arising in everyday life. I believe that bringing these questions in the classroom allows for an open space to learn and to make the environment as inclusive as possible. Speaking to a gentleman in my class, he said he hasn't been to school since he was 10 years old. He is now 30. He wanted to know how to speak in court, how to be resilient, and how to approach difficult situations with mental health issues. Resilience and mental health is imperative to my teaching philosophy for the student and the teacher. As someone who deals with mental health on a daily basis, I was told on my first day of teacher training that you had to be resilient, and how many teachers struggle with mental health. And I thought I'd never be good enough because of my disability. I woke up the next morning and went to university and told myself, if we let our disabilities define us, how are we meant to teach our students how to deal with their disabilities? If I can do this, I believe my students can flourish. My ideologies are somewhat theoretical, but being that student, being told no, you are not good enough, and getting to where I am, I cannot wait to help those students that have been told no their whole lives. The first time I worked with ESOL learners, I had a gentleman ask me a very simple question. When he understood, I found myself saying, "Well done!" I took a step back and felt my well done sounded insincere, which led me to think about unconditional positive regard. On reflection, I considered Iberg's examination of Roger's theory. I would have simply acknowledged that he got the right answer and encouraged further study. I must think of a teacher when it's appropriate to be enthusiastic about my students doing something right. I find this aspect of my teaching philosophy most difficult because encouragement and positive reaction is my role and responsibility for my students, and if done correctly, it is then effective further motivation to study. I believe knowing my students will allow me to judge how best to react to their actions. Ofsted talks about encouragement and the readiness to learn. In my concept teaching, I believe that there are a lot more reasons for lack of engagement, and it is my job as the educator to approach these reasons by creating safe space for my learners to be able to deal with the problems you have whilst at school. Making sure safeguarding responsibilities are there and allowing students to engage in education but by being emotionally sound. We are in fact there to make well-rounded educated people. When I decided to focus my teacher training in further education, I analysed how high school can be difficult for students and that they do deserve a chance later on in life to get an education that they did not respond to initially. It is imperative to follow policies set out for our teachers, as these are what keeps us and our students safe. In any work environment, you will not agree on all the rules, but one thing I am proud of being a part is the current development of and importance of safeguarding and policy. Every person in the world should be entitled to a free education and should not be tainted or disadvantaged for their past mistakes. As a teacher, I am here to educate, to develop human beings to their best selves, and to not just tell someone how to pass a test. I am, however, not naive to pressures from an educational hierarchy. I understand as teachers, we are there to get the grades written on a piece of paper, pass the Ofsted inspections, and tick the boxes laid out for us. But I do not believe these are the only aspects of teaching. Being diverse and adaptable in subjects you are teaching is something I am learning is the nature of teaching. My subject specialism being media performance, and being asked to teach maths and English was a shock to the system. I decided I would do my best and study and to take on new challenges. This brings us the idea of self-determined learning, my hutagogi. I believe if you want to be a successful educator, you need to constantly updating your own knowledge in and around your subjects. However, teaching maths and English, I am facing new challenges of active learning. Coming from a performance background where active learning was key to every lesson, I am now finding myself adapting to how I will use active learning in these subjects. The perfect teacher does not exist because every student responds differently, but I would like to aspire to be the best teacher I can be, being adaptable, creating safe spaces and caring for my work, continuing my education and continuing teaching. If that's teaching maths in a prison or training future actors, development to be my best self, my ideal self, is key.